Welcome back. All right, now that the news cycle slowed down a little bit, at least for now, it could really ramp up again. But before it does, I want to talk about the LA Kings. I want to talk about the LA Kings because they're a team that I do think gets overlooked when we talk about who could win a Stanley Cup this year and who could end up being a favorite. And while I get it, this is a team that's made the playoffs the last 2 years, been eliminated in the first round the last 2 years. I do think that there's a lot to like about the LA Kings. And there's good reason to think that, well, yes, Vegas won the Cup and Edmonton's going to be a favorite as well. The LA Kings could play spoiler. They're currently, according to the site I looked at, 11th in Cup odds. They were tied with Florida, which seems to be right around where I've seen them in a lot, right? Where they're middle of the pack. They're very likely to make the playoffs. They're seen as a team that gets eliminated in the first round. Yep, LA's going to make it. They'll probably be third place again. And they'll probably get eliminated by Vegas or Edmonton in the first round again. The reality is, could that happen? Yes, but have they made some moves to change things? I think a little bit. Now, the last 3 years have shown that progression on the team. 2020, 2021 was the last year of the rebuild. They finished 21, 28, and 7 for 49 points, as it was all divisional games. 438 was their points percentage. They were 27th in goals scored. They were 19th in goals allowed. So definitely needed work on both. And then 2021, 2022, they finished 44, 27, and 11 for 99 points, a 604 points percentage, 20th in goals for and 8th in goals against. So they improved both areas, goal scoring as well as defense. This past season, they finished 47, 25, and 10, 104 points, 634 points percentage, 9th in goals for. Their goals against dropped to 16th. As it was well documented, the issues they had with goaltending, right? Copley gets brought up kind of on an emergency basis because it wasn't working with Peterson. Quick, clearly it wasn't clicking with him. And so eventually Quick gets traded in a move that it was clumsy, but in the end it kind of works, right? You bring in Korpisalo, who has now moved on to Ottawa, and Gavrikov, who they opted to keep. And because they were going to keep Gavrikov, they had to jettison other money. So the big trade they made in the offseason, of course, is that they traded Gabe Vilardi, Rasmus Kupari, and Alex Iafallo to the Winnipeg Jets, a team that needed some forward depth, in exchange for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then they doubled down with Dubois by signing him to that massive extension. And so there's a lot of pressure on Dubois to live up to that extension, to take that next step in his career. But do I think he can? Absolutely. That being said, they also traded Sean Durzi to the Coyotes in exchange for a 2024 second-round pick, and they managed to trade Cal Peterson's contract. That was a huge, huge anchor around the team's neck for a while there, and they did manage to move it. So full credit to Rob Blake. I've seen him take some criticism with some of the moves that have been made in the offseason. I think he's done a good job of maybe fixing this team up just that little bit to make them a true contender. But we'll go through this. So we'll start with the top six and talk about the forward group. You've got Byfield, Kopitar, Kempe, Fiala, Dubois, Arvidsson. Very likely your top six, right? This is a solid top six. One thing I like with this top six, there isn't one forward that you look at for the Kings and say, if we shut him down, we shut out the Kings. So the scoring, they should stay top 10 in scoring this year. And the addition of Dubois, I think, is a solid one. Yes, Vilardi has upside as well. Kupari may have some upside, and Iafallo's a good producer, but I think Dubois is worth the risk. And again, they had the depth to make that move. They absolutely had the depth for that move to work. So Byfield's one to talk about because there's always a lot of criticism of Byfield. And while I get it, I'm telling you, as somebody who watches as much hockey as I can, Byfield got better as the season went along. The numbers just didn't really show it. But the amount of faith that he was getting from Todd McClellan down the stretch tells you a lot. So his ice time went from 12 minutes and 9 seconds in the 2021-2022 season to 14 minutes and 3 seconds this past year, almost 2 extra minutes per game. So he's playing a lot more. Again, the scoring doesn't necessarily reflect that. And his first 10 games of the year, he was getting less than 13 minutes of ice time in every single game. Did not reach 13 minutes, but over the next 4, he had 14 or more minutes per game. And then towards the end of the season, he was playing a ton. Again, on that top line, more than 15 minutes in 7 of their last 9 regular season games. So he was playing a lot. And his average time on ice in March and April was more than 15 minutes. The problem is the scoring didn't reflect it. 20 games played in March and April, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. If Byfield takes that next step as a scorer, his shooting percentage was like, I think 4.8%, not great. If he can get that shooting percentage more towards the 10% range and keep taking those shots, he's going to surprise some people. He could be in the 15, 20 goal range this year. And you add those goals to the other goals that are, going to come from guys like Fiala and Kempe and Dubois and Arvidsson. All these guys are decent goal scorers at the very least. Good goal scorers, I would say, for all 6 as well. Again, all 6 if Byfield takes that next step. He is 21 years of age. It feels like he's been in the league forever. He hasn't. So that, I think, is the key. Also, the fact that Danault drops to third-line center, you have so many things you can do. So if things go kind of south, Danault has proven that he can jump up to second-line center. You might be able to move a center to the wing, give a team a different look. And I think Danault should still be pretty productive on a third line. Plus, it means that they could roll 3 scoring lines, which is key if you want to be a contender in this league as well. Very often in the playoffs, it's whichever team has the most depth wins. And then you get to the blue line, which I still think is underrated. Mikey Anderson, Drew Doughty, Vlad Gavrikov. Matt Roy's probably top 4, and I only say probably because Brandt Clarke is going to force himself into that conversation. I would think Clark starts out on that third pairing. Does he move up to the second pairing? We shall see. But the top 4, I think, is good. I think it's underrated. I really do. Especially Anderson and Roy. People know I'm a big fan of both players. The goaltending is still a bit of a question mark. So you have Talbot, who had an .898 save percentage. But if you go to the advanced stats, it would tell you he gave solid numbers to Ottawa. He just didn't have very good defense in front of him. Then you got Copley, who had a .903 save percentage, and they've added Riddick. Now, where things get interesting to me is Riddick. A lot of people not huge fans of Riddick necessarily, but if you look at their general resume, Riddick may end up getting that backup spot. And I say this because Copley's 31 years of age. He's played 40 career NHL games, more than half of those this past season, and he did start 2022-2023 in the AHL. I would also say that if Rob Blake waives Copley at the start of training camp, and I've talked about this before, if you waive him early, he will clear. And then you end up in a situation where you have Talbot, you have Riddick, and if Riddick has some issues, you can then bring Copley back up, waive Riddick, and then Riddick likely passes through waivers. But I think that might be a solid way to go about it. We'll see what they do when it comes to the goaltending. But again, Copley, most of his career, he's been an AHL level goaltender. I would not be surprised to see him in the AHL. Because again, it's not like a team's going to look and say, well, this guy's a young player and, he could be our backup goalie. At 31 years of age, I don't think teams are as likely to take a chance on him on waivers. But that being said, Copley could have a great training camp and end up being the starter. Talbot's the backup and Riddick goes on waivers and ends up in the minors instead. That absolutely can happen. But that'll be interesting because the question then becomes, if you're going to win a Stanley Cup, can one of those 3 goaltenders get you there? Talbot has the experience. Copley, I think, is going to have the fan support because of his win-loss record last year and the fact he stabilized that net. And Riddick's a wild card. I can't see that with Riddick, but in the back of my head, I think, yeah, but I didn't see Aiden Hills coming either, and I don't think most of us did. So those runs can happen, and they can be very unlikely at the same time. Now, Alex Turcotte is one that he's definitely had his problems with staying healthy. Played 4 games for LA this past season, no points. In Ontario, played 32 games, 6 goals, 11 assists, 17 points. Not the kind of development you want for a guy who was a top draft pick not that long ago, right? So now if Turcotte were able to really get himself going and have a good start, have a really good camp, maybe he ends up in the forward group, not top 6, not going to argue top 6, but if he ended up on a third line with Danault or ended up being a solid, speedy guy on the fourth line, that kind of thing, we'll see. Now, when they won the Cup in 2012, it was not expected by anybody. It was their 3rd year in the playoffs. Hey, look, they're going into potentially their 3rd year in the playoffs. So there's that. There's 2 holdovers from that team now that Jonathan Quick is gone. Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty, who of course won it in 2012 and 2014. And they've also got Trevor Lewis returning now, so you've got 3 guys who won the Cups in 2012 and 2014. Now, that 2012 team was one that had trouble scoring. 29th in goals for, 2nd in goals against. The 2014 team was mildly better at 25th in goals for and first in goals against. So it's an interesting change in how LA's built now compared to how LA was built then. Now it's an exciting, high-scoring team who does have some issues with goaltending numbers. We'll see if those improve this year. They should, right? Like I said, Talbot's numbers don't tell you he played well for Ottawa last year. Copley's numbers were stronger than either Peterson's or Quick's last year. The numbers should overall get better. But this is a team that's built a little different, and yet both the 2012 and 2014 teams were third in the Pacific Division, which is where LA's found themselves the last 2 years. And will they end up third again? Most people are betting they will. So as long as LA can stay in third place and maybe fend off a Calgary Flames team that could be resurgent this year, maybe this is a big year, right? Maybe this is a big year for the LA Kings. Todd McClelland has got a solid record with the LA Kings since being hired. 141 wins, 115 regulation losses, 34 losses in overtime or shootouts. Keeping in mind that he came in during that rebuild and he's been here for a while. If the Kings get off to a slow start, McClelland's going to have to look over his shoulder a little bit. But that being said, I think there's some solid players on this team. I think keeping Gavrikov was the right move. Trading Durzi, they may end up kind of shaking their head at that one later. But if Durzi hits for Arizona as well as I think he can on the power play and puts up the kind of points I know he can, I don't think LA could have afforded to keep him anyways. And I don't know if his style of play 5-on-5 would have worked for a team that's trying to get their goals against down, right? Durzi can be a bit of an adventure 5-on-5. I admit that. So it's a fascinating roster they've got. I do think that they kind of get overlooked and maybe taken for granted a little bit that, well, clearly Edmonton and Vegas are going to be the best. So it's their division and one of them is going to be in the conference final. But can the Kings get there? Is this the year that we see the Kings take that next step? Because, again, the teams in 2012 and 2014 weren't beasts during the regular season. It's just when it was playoff time, they upped their game. And that's where an incoming player like Clark, a veteran goaltender like Talbot, and maybe a blossoming Quentin Byfield could really make that difference. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding the LA Kings. Are they right in where they should be in cup odds? And yeah, no, this team's going to be out in the first round. Or is this a team that could be really dangerous come playoff time? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.